All right, I'm starting a recording. This is Creative Writing on Monday, and I'm getting no signal from my webcam, so this is just audio on top of the screen capture. On Friday, we did just kind of catch up work, and if you turn something in, let me know and I'll grade it. But we got our poem. So far, we've done 2 steps, and we're about to do one more. And today I'm going to read 2, because I always try to read 2 examples and show you guys variety. This one you may have seen before. It's pretty classic in a lot of textbooks and so on, but I think it's actually worth it. Sometimes you see a book or a story or poem or something that's in a bunch of textbooks and it's really not special. I think this one kind of is. So let's take a look here. Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden. Sundays, too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold. Then with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the cold, splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? So this is a type of poem that you see a lot, which is that the older person reflecting back on their childhood and thinking, here's an experience I had, but here's my new angle on it. So if this was from the perspective of the kid, it would not appreciate the father. It would be like, oh yeah, he must like to get up and make all that noise, and that's a weird thing he does. But the adult now, looking back, realizes that even though the father never said, I love you, never expressed his feelings in a way that might be understandable to the kid, he was doing the best he could by getting up early, even though he had to get up early all the other days too, and start a fire, chop the wood, warm up the house, get it all ready while everybody else was cozy in their beds. So the meaning is very reflective, and it's very, self-critiquing of his younger days. Now, the thing we're going to look at is something else, but first I'm going to read the other poem I've chosen for today, and then we'll look at the commonalities. This is not too far off in time. We got a 1962, and then here's one from 76, but this is a very different poem. It's called One Art by Elizabeth Bishop, and you'll notice right away it rhymes, and it's got a lot of repeating lines that come back around. This is a form called a villanelle. A villanelle is a type of poetry where you have 3 lines per stanza until the last one, and you have this sort of ABA format. So you've got like the first and third of each one rhyme, and then the first and third of the next one rhyme, but the middle one carries this pattern from all the other middle ones. You'll see when you get to it. And then certain lines repeat entire lines in a certain cycle. The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day, except the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing farther, losing faster. Places and names and where it was you meant to travel. None of these will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch, and look, my last or next to last of 3 loved houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones, and vaster, some realms I own, 2 rivers, a continent. I missed them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love, I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like, write it, like disaster. So if you want to get into this form, you can check out the rules of a villanelle and see how you start with a line that comes back around a certain amount of times. And you really get this nice expectation built where the reader knows it's coming and they feel it land, and then we move on to the next thing. This poem also has the perspective of an older person looking back and saying, here's what my life has been like in this new way of seeing it. This time it's about somebody who has lost things, friends and relationships, and also items like keys or whatever. And so how if you lose one thing, it seems like a big deal, but if you've lived for many decades and lost so many, you almost get good at it, is what this is about. But the reason why I chose these two poems today is because they both have their own way of expressing sound. The sound of a poem is a huge deal. And when you write a story, it's really not. You might focus on an especially rhythmic line, or you might really think about the names of your characters and what do they want to express with the, sounds of the first name or something. But in general, it's not the number one concern. It's not even like number 5. It's way down the list. But when you're doing a poem, it pretty much is the top. Okay, the sound of a poem is a huge deal, just like the sound of a song. And the most famous example of that is rhyme. You can have rhyme, just like this poem does, where you get to the end of a line and it's echoing, 1 or 2 lines ago. In this poem, we have 2 endings. You've got the master, disaster, fluster, and then you have the intent, spent, meant, went. And those just echo each other all the way through, and then the last stanza has 1 extra to really put a cherry on top. But even if you don't have rhymes fully, you can sprinkle in a few. We've seen some examples in the poems so far where you don't rhyme, but then you throw in 1 at the end. Okay, we've seen a couple of those. The rattlesnake poem was like that. And if you read Shakespeare in your English class, a lot of Shakespeare's speeches are like that, where a character is speaking and they don't rhyme, but then at the end, they do. And it's like, now we know. That was the conclusion. That was the wrap-up. And it shows that it's special. So one thing you might do in your poem is some kind of rhyme. You don't have to, but it's people like it for a reason. And it's a very... it helps you write it because you kind of know where you're going, know what you're aiming for. It also helps people memorize it. It also helps people listen and they know what to expect. If they can feel a certain thing is coming at the end of the line, and then it does, it feels like it's all connected, like it has a plan instead of just being random words. But you don't have to rhyme, okay? You don't have to. Another thing you might do is alliteration. Let's jump back to those winter Sundays for a minute. And this poem has a ton of alliteration. It's like almost too much. Like if there was a little bit more, it would be cheesy. But it's not. You really push the limit of like weekday weather, bank fires blaze, blue black coal, cracked hands it aches. Like basically every line in here has like 1 key word, like 1 really meaningful, important word, and then right after it, there's an echo of that same sound. Okay? Really, really highlighting that word. And then even stretching from one line to the next, you start to have alliteration or other types of repetition that cover many words. So for example, you've got crack, hands, ache, blue, black, cold, thank, wake. You got all these K sounds. And then when the guy goes down the steps, he doesn't even have to say the word creak. You know that the steps are creaky because it's in the air. You've had so many of these wake, cake, thank, ache, crack. You've had so many of these K sounds that like he doesn't even have to say the stairs are creaky. You know the stairs are creaky because it's already out there. And he can even just say words that are kind of sort of creaky sounding, like fearing the chronic angers of that house. And we know, we get it. Like, he doesn't have to say it, but we know the stairs are creaky, right? It's almost like you can just put a sound out there and then it just ripples around, okay? So another possibility, and I've already suggested this to some of you guys when I was looking at the documents last week. With some of you, I was like, ooh, this word is important, so let's echo it. Let's have like some of the words nearby have the same sound. And that's another way you might use basically anything other than just picking words for their meaning. Meaning's great, meaning's fine, but you can choose words for their other qualities as well. One example I put in my little assignment that I'm going to post here is, like, let's say you're describing colors. You often have a million different color words that are pretty much the same thing. And you get to choose which one based on how it sounds. So if you've got like a flower with a strong red color, like a real deep red, you know, fire engine red, we might say, you could call that scarlet. Scarlet is a real strong, crunchy, punchy, sharp word that feels like it cuts, like it carries some weight, and it packs a punch. Or you could say vermilion. Okay, vermilion is pretty much exactly the same meaning. Like if you look up the scarlet shade and you look up vermilion, they're like, 1% different in terms of the color value. But the words are really different. Vermilion is an extremely soft, flowing, light, cloudy word that has no hard consonants, no crunchy sounds. It's really lots of little syllables, and it sounds kind of academic. It sounds like something you might see in an old book, but it doesn't sound scary. Like scarlet almost sounds scary, like, it's often used to describe blood whenever somebody gets injured because it's really, immediate and in your face, where vermilion is not. Vermilion is like, oh, that sounds kind of nice. Or you might just remember it from Pokemon. I think there's a Pokemon town called Vermilion City or something. Anyway, that's another example. So this assignment is to look at the poem, the one you already have, not a new one, and figure out some way of using the sound qualities of the poem. You might pick an important word and do some alliteration around it. You might put in some rhymes. You might put in some repetition with echoes, like the windmill poem would have the same word appear 2 or 3 times in a row to embody that circular nature of the windmill. It depends on, what your poem is about and how long the lines are and things like that. But if you need help, let me know and I will suggest a few things if I haven't already. And that's going to be the last step. Once we get all 3 of these things, your assignment next time is actually not an assignment, it's an assessment where you're going to turn in a first draft of a poem. Okay, so that'll be our first assessment grade for the quarter. They're actually looking pretty good. I looked at your stuff, last week, and most of the ones are making progress, and they got a good idea, and they have a lot of room to be sculpted into something really nice. So there we go.